It's time for Clubhouse Chatter. Here's Norm Ordez.
Hey, that's right. We're back for another day of Clubhouse Chatter. And my first guest this evening is former Major Leaguer Billy Sample. Billy played with the Rangers. Let me see if I get this right. The Rangers, I know the Braves, and then the Yankees, correct?
Correct. Most of it with the Rangers. I was drafted twice by the Rangers out of high school in the 28th round by Joe Branzel, the scout, a beautiful man. And he must have heard my disappointment because the scout had told me I was going to go somewhere in the teams, and I was drafted in the 28th round. And back then there were 24 teams, so Joe could hear my disappointment. And he said, "Well, Bill, 23 of the teams passed over you 27 times." That's just to say, don't blame us for drafting the 28th round.
So now,
I'm sure he had used that line before.
So now you've had an interesting life. I was reading your about your early life, and you played as a wide receiver at Andrew Lewis High School, and you scored the winning touchdown in the 1971 state AAA quarterfinal game. A victory later, Andrew Lewis advanced to the state championship where Andrew Lewis lost to T.C. Williams High School, and T.C. Williams was the school that was Remember the Titans. And so you played.
Right, depicted in the movie, yeah.
Yeah, so how close was that?
Well, other than the fact that they played in the movie, they played their district rival, Marshall, because that was the only close game they played that year. Of the 13 games that they played, they shut out 8 opponents, including us. So you really couldn't Hollywood up a 27-0 score. And I might tell you the game was closer than that, but it was still 27-0.
Wow.
And so they did take one liberty that I can certainly understand. The linebacker, Bertier, who was hospitalized and listening to the final game on the radio in the hospital, he actually played in the game. He didn't have that car accident until later that school year.
Oh, okay.
You can kind of understand how they did that, why they did that. The people in Salem, Virginia, where I went to high school at Andrew Lewis High School, they weren't real crazy about the way they were not depicted in the movie, but you can certainly understand how they're going to make a better story for it. The only other thing that was true was that the game was played in Roanoke, Virginia, which it was. But and the only thing we really knew about them was that they combined 3 schools, because you're going from playing in the regionals and playing in the semifinals and then the final, so you really don't have a lot of time to grasp their history, and we probably had our own history, so we really didn't care, except that they had 66 players. I think we had 37.
Wow.
But
so
they had a good defense.
One of my all-time favorite movies. That is a pretty dang good movie, though, regardless.
Yeah, a lot of people really enjoy that, and they still talk about it. I don't know how many people know that in real life I was involved in that movie. We had a 30-year anniversary of that game a few years back, and I think about 14 of their players showed up and 13 of ours, including, for them, Herman Boone, the coach, the real coach, that Denzel Washington played. And I told Herman they didn't allow Denzel for a Disney movie to play him the way that he really was, which is a little more in your face than even Denzel could be, if you can imagine that, because he was pretty much in your face in that movie.
Right. So you were drafted by the Rangers. Take us through the experience of being drafted.
Oh, wow, that's a good one, Norm. Okay, so back in those days, you didn't have the MLB network at MLB.com, so you would hear from a phone call, like I had mentioned earlier when Joe Branzel called me. I was down at Myrtle Beach. We had 6 athletes sharing a room. It was our graduation present to ourselves, and I waited, and I think 2 days I did get the call from Joe, and as I told you, I was a little bit disappointed that I didn't go higher than that, but I went on to what became James Madison University. It was Madison College, but at the time that I entered, way back when, it was formerly an all-female institution. In fact, when I was there in the early mid-'70s, it was 3-1. And but we really had our baseball coach, Brad Babcock, a tremendous recruiter and coach. And from what would have been my sophomore year, we had 7 players sign professional contracts. and some of them got to high. Let's see, Todd Winterfeld, who was probably the best all-around player, made it to AAA with the Cubs and Mets. J.W. Mitchell, our shortstop, made it to AAA with the Cubs. Jim Barber, first baseman, made it to AA with the Rangers. Tim Simone at Fried. Michael Casson with the Orioles. And I think we had another player, Roger Lee, I think, played independent ball. And I may be missing a player somewhere along the way. But we had, for an organization that had our school, who had only 4 years, I think, of a male athletic program. That's certainly a baseball program. We really had some tremendous athletes. And I think where I really got better, Norm, was playing in the summer league. It's a Shenandoah Valley League, and they have a gazillion of leagues now, but back then they had the Alaska League, the Cape Cod League, the Valley League, which they still have those 3 leagues. In fact, I was working in the Alaska League this summer with some young people, and I would tell them that for my first year in the Valley League, we had 4 players make it to the major leagues from that league. So it really helped me, I think, to measure up along with the other good players along the Eastern Seaboard and to allow me to feel that I had talent enough to go forward. And it turned out that way.
We have one of those leagues here, not too far from us. It's the West Coast Baseball League, and it's got like the Corvallis Knights in it, and it's kind of it's getting to the caliber of the Alaskan League and the Cape Cod League. It's pretty good caliber baseball, and
I've heard that. I've heard that, Norm. Yeah, somebody was saying that this year, and in fact, that has really stepped up. I think the Alaska League has taken a step back a little bit,
right.
And what I gather now that the Cape Cod League would be number one in your league and the Alaska League, and I don't think the Valley League is as strong as it was back in the day, but from what I understand, the Cape Cod League has sort of taken over. Back in my day, the Cape and the Valley, I think, were about the same, except the Cape had much better conditions, conditions than we had. My goodness, and I had to work during the day, so I'm working at a job as a painter at the college where I had attended at James Madison in Harrisonburg, Virginia. So I'm working there from about 9 to 4, and then going and playing, and then traveling maybe an hour, depending on where the game was, and then coming back and doing that night after night. When I got to the professional ball, especially in AA ball, conditions were tough, and guys would complain, and I just sort of shook my head. I said, "You folks don't know what tough is," even though it was tough in those days too, because we had the long bus rides, and you're sleeping in the luggage racks, and you're still working on your craft. But it's not the easiest journey along the way.
You know, I tell people all the time about sleeping in the luggage racks on the buses. They don't believe me. So we have a connection. We have a connection with James Madison here, and we have a local college, Linfield College. It's a Division III school, and one of our former quarterbacks, All-American Brett Elliott, is, I believe, a quarterbacks coach at James Madison now. He started off at Mississippi State, and now he's over at James Madison. So we've got that little local connection going on. So.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll have to check it out when I get the information from JMU. And I tell you what, I have to be honest with you. When they won the championship in 2004, and I was as excited as anyone watching a championship game, they had a really strong power running game. But if you asked me to name 3 or 4 players, I'd be lost.
Right.
I'm a few years away, but I do get a kick out of some of the people who, like Lindsay Zarniak, who went to James Madison. Every once in a while, somebody will pop up, or an actress or a producer, which they've had a lot of at JMU, and think, wow, I can remember way back when this sort of started, and it wasn't, like Charles Haley, who went into the Hall of Fame, and who was on it last night at the 49ers game. He went to JMU, and I remember when I started, they were still playing a JV football schedule at a high school field.
Oh, wow.
So they've come a long way. I really give the president at that time, Ronald Carey, a lot of credit for bringing the school up the way that he knew through athletics.
So I worked with the Arizona Diamondbacks, and I was a clubhouse manager in Lancaster, California in 2006. And we had a pitcher by the name of Jared Doyle, who was, I believe, a number 2 draft pick by the Diamondbacks back in like 2001. He's a JMU guy as well. So,
oh my goodness!
Yeah. So he. They
are continuing the legacy.
There's a lot of JMU guys out there, and so. So what was
we had a good team back then. We as I said, from what would have been my sophomore year, we had 7 guys get drafted, and
wow.
it was really a talented bunch of kids. Even some of the guys who didn't get drafted were really talented.
Right. Is there a highlight of your Major League Baseball career? Do you have one?
Yes, I do. In fact, I have it on YouTube, or I'll look forward to sending it to you if you want me.
Okay, absolutely.
To do that. If you have time and you're bored and you want to see what players looked like back in the 70s and 80s, I can do that for you.
I know what players.
I am able enough to do that. Yes.
I know what players looked like back in the 70s and 80s. I grew up with you guys, and so I grew up, with the Topps cards with the little hats on it and the Billy Sample, and I know who you are and watched you. I grew up a Braves fan, grew up in Kimberly, Idaho. And the Atlanta Braves were the only thing we can get on WTBS. And so I grew up a Dale Murphy fan and, listened to Pete Van Wieren and Skip Carey and Ernie Johnson, and it doesn't get any better than those 3 as far as I'm concerned. There's a lot of good ones.
That's you to say, Norm, yeah.
But
I got to work with them a couple of years in the broadcast booth in 88 and 89, and I can't tell you how much I appreciated the way they welcomed me to the booth and accepted me as when he was just off the field, and he even let me do some play-by-play there, which I really appreciated.
Nice, and don't get me wrong, Vin Scully, is awesome. I think Vin Scully isn't the best in the game, but I grew up with those 3,
sure. Yeah.
And listening to them, and Atlanta Braves baseball was right after Sanford and Son on WTBS, and I remember that vividly. It was great times growing up on Lincoln Street in Kimberly, Idaho, sitting in the basement on a hot summer day watching the Atlanta Braves play.
What was your closest baseball stadium?
Oh, man. Seattle. The Mariners, the Kingdom. Okay. Yeah, so I was in Idaho, so I was quite a ways from a Major League Baseball stadium.
What's that, about an 8-hour drive?
Oh, I'm saying that's probably at least 12.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Yeah, we're in southern Idaho, so...
okay.
But yeah, that was the closest. We didn't even have... Well, we did have a minor league team in Idaho Falls and probably Pocatello, but I never made it out to any of them. And so I grew up watching, Major League Baseball on TV and then going to college's Southern Idaho games. So baseball wasn't big it wasn't huge where I grew up. Our high school didn't have baseball growing up.
I was just going to say that I was a little luckier than you, Norm, in that I grew up in a minor league town. I grew up in Salem, Virginia, which had an affiliate with the Giants, and most of my growing up with the Pirates. And I had the opportunity to watch players and sort of try to measure up, looking behind the screen and think if I could, or wonder if I could hit this certain pitcher or that certain pitcher. And lo and behold, just a few years later, I'm playing against those pitchers, or in some cases playing with guys like Mario Mendoza, who I watched play growing up, and then we were later teammates. So that was kind of neat.
The Mendoza line, that's a heck of a...
Yeah, he doesn't like that either, by the way.
I know he doesn't.
Mario doesn't like that.
I know. I mean, who would?
And he says it because... I'm sorry, no, pardon me for cutting you off, but he says it because there are people that will use the Mendoza line, some of the broadcasters, who had lower batting average than he did. So
oh, yeah.
He really takes exception to that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, the crazy thing is Mario, you don't get to the major leagues and you suck. You're a heck of an athlete, to even get to the major leagues. And even play minor league ball, you're a heck of an athlete. That is one of the biggest things that drives me nuts is, you'll hear, people, oh, that guy doesn't belong there. Major League Baseball, you've got to be a hell of an athlete to play.
Yeah, you got to be pretty good to be mediocre up there.
You do.
Everybody's on scholarship up there.
Yeah. So let's...
I didn't realize he was that bad of a hitter because with us, with the Rangers, I want to say it was either 82 or 83, he batted 241. So it was okay for a slick fielding shortstop back in the day.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would wash quite the same way today because now the shortstops can hit, throw, and run and hit with power. And back in the day, it seemed like only Ripken and maybe a couple others could do that.
Yeah. So let's talk about Reunion 108. What is it?
Do you know why it's 108?
I do not.
Spoiler alert. It's because there are 108 stitches in a baseball.
Perfect. That's awesome.
Tricky, aren't I?
That is pretty good.
My oldest brother, who's also producer in the movie, has chastised me for not explaining that somewhere in the movie. But I thought it would be one of those things that baseball fans would get a kick out of. It's two different generations of players coming back for a minor league reunion. And it's a lot of clubhouse. It's a college frat-like clubhouse comedy, but it's got some edge to it. It's got some satire to it. It's got some parody to it. It did everything I wanted it to do, though. I can't complain about it. The actors were great, especially me being a first-time movie maker. It was fun trying to put it all together. The movie editor and I spend way too much time together, Brent Dolan and I. But it really does represent what goes on in my sick mind. And now it's on DVD and instant download. We had a brief theatrical run of about 4 cities and 4 states, and 2 actually theater chain theaters, Carmike in my hometown, and a bow tie where I live now in northeast New Jersey. And had a premiere in New York State. But I thought I was going to make my money up in the secondary market because it's just that kind of movie. It's probably more targeted to college frat kind of kids, but it's got a lot of baseball in it, a lot of behind-the-scenes baseball, and a lot of comedy, but it's got an edge to it. I think my biggest compliment, Norm, was coming from the person who rated the movie, and I was so happy to get a strong R. I thought I had a chance of getting NC-17. I thought I'll never make my money back here. And he was very complimentary of the movie, and I would imagine that he gets to rate probably all the sports movies or baseball movies, and his era was the 1950s, so we talked about that a lot. But when he complimented it, I thought, okay, I'm on to something, and I don't really care about anything else. If he knows baseball, he knows movies, and he knows how to rate movies, and I get a compliment there, then I'm good.
Now, did you say Brett Dolan?
I said, yes, Brent Dolan.
Brent.
He's Brent. I'm sorry, Brent.
Okay.
Do you know a Brett Dolan?
I do know Brett Dolan. Brett Dolan, well, he used to be the play-by-play guy for the Houston Astros. And so he was up. He was up here.
Before Bill Brown was there.
I'm not sure if it was before Bill Brown. I know he was. I believe he was the Tucson Sidewinders play-by-play guy years ago, back in like 2004 to like 2006, and then he got the call up to Houston.
After Bill, okay. Yeah.
And so he got the call to Houston. I think he's still there in Houston. And so I was going to say, that's a small world that if Brett's helping you out.
Well, Norm, I played my AAA ball in Tucson. Loved it. Just loved it. It was a great experience. Jack Donovan was our general manager, and he had nicknames for everybody. So when we took the field, he'd call you by your nickname, and mine was the Riff.
The Riff.
And I really like that. And in fact, I played against guys. When I see Dick Pohl years later in the big leagues, he still remembered my nickname as the Wrist, and we played against each other actually. So that was quite neat. I love Tucson. Some of the people said that I was going to come back after batting third in the league. I think I had a 352 average, which everybody in the PCL has a 300-plus average.
Right.
But was third in the league, and because some of the players who had good years came back to Tucson, and I thought, well, folks, that's really nice, but I love Tucson, but I'm not coming back here.
So now you also played up at Portland at old Civic Stadium.
Where was that?
Up in Portland, Oregon. I know we've chatted about you playing in Portland a few times.
Oh, yeah. We played I think we played on was it a college campus that we played on? It seemed like there was either a big campus in the background or maybe a large library.
Yeah, it was
a turf field.
Yes, it's the Multnomah Athletic Club now, but back then it might have been connected with Portland State somehow. But yeah, Civic Stadium. It's an all soccer facility now.
I remember some of the players. Eric Wilkins, who I didn't realize at the time was Lenny Wilkins' son. And
Oh, wow.
Wilkins had a real promising baseball career as a pitcher, but I think he hurt his arm.
Right.
But he had really good stuff. And then I remember facing Larry Anderson, who pitched forever in the major leagues, and then
Yep.
thinking as he's throwing slider off the outside corner, slider, fastball, chase slider. So I'm thinking, wait a minute, this guy's in AAA? How tough can it be up there if this guy's in AAA with this kind of control and this kind of stuff? And I think I faced him in the big leagues too. He's still going the same way, slider, and just pinpoint control. And he threw forever in the majors and later became a broadcaster, as you know,
Yep.
primarily with the Phillies.
Yep. If you had to give advice to young players, what would it be?
Well, there's very little substitute for hard work, unless you have just unreal talent. Unreal talent's going to win out, but not many people have the kind of talent that are going to separate themselves that much from everybody else. So hard work is one thing, and then figure out what you need to make it to the next level that will separate yourself from someone else. Usually scouts are looking for big league something.
Yeah.
Big league speed, major league power, major league arm, major league something along those lines that will accelerate your ascension to the major leagues. So if you have good speed, make it great speed. Figure out what you need to do. Do you need to run down hills to increase your length, your stride? Does that work for you? If you have a real good arm, make it a great arm. If you need to throw the javelin, whatever. A lot of the work everyone does, but then the work that separates you from someone else is what you do on your own. It's what you do to internalize what you need to do to get better from one day to the next. I think it's probably as good of advice as I can give.
That's pretty good
and
advice.
It's a very select profession. As you know, Norm, you've been around. It's a very select profession. When I was coming up, I think they were saying 1 out of 13 will make it to the majors. In fact, my first team, after I was drafted my junior year from James Madison, Joe Klein, who's still around and still one of my best people, he runs the Atlantic League now. He's the CEO of the Atlantic League, but he was back then they called them farm directors. Mm-hmm. He was player personnel director back then, and he would see the talent that he had drafted. And he, at one of these gatherings of about 25 to 30 of us, he said, take a look to your left and right and pick out another person, because that's all that's going to make it to the majors. So he wasn't saying it to scare us. He was just saying that's reality.
Yep.
And sure enough, Steve Comer preceded me to the majors, and he was just sort of an add-on out of the University of Minnesota, and he was a big change-up artist, and he had a nice 7-8 year career in the big leagues. And Brian Allard got probably the proverbial cup of coffee with both Texas and Seattle, yeah. and that's it.
Didn't Allard also play for the Indians?
Who else did Brian play for?
Didn't he play for the Indians as well?
You may be right. I remember him with a little bit of time with Texas and Seattle. But,
right.
But if you say some more teams, then you're probably right.
Yeah. For some reason, the Indians are clicking for some odd reason. So, once again, we got Mr. Billy Sample.
I don't care much about the pitchers.
Once again, we have Mr. Billy Sample. Now, you have a website, and that is www.billysample.com.
Yes. And if you want to purchase the movie, either on instant download, to rent it, or to buy it, or to buy the DVD, I would say probably the best way to go is either the Reunion 108 Facebook,
okay,
or on its IMDb page, internetmoviebase.com, and then type in Reunion 108, and then you'll see the cast and crew, and then there's a spot there for where you can order the movie there as well, if you like that. But you may have to leave your morality a little bit at the door, but aside from that, there's a lot of laughs, and it'll give you a behind-the-scenes look in the clubhouse that you that maybe even you haven't seen.
I've seen a lot go on. I've spent a lot of time in clubhouses. I've seen a lot. People are amazed. I do tell stories about what has happened in the clubhouse, but there are many stories that my mouth is sealed that I do not speak about.
That's right. Yeah, there's some stories that I'm sure that you'll take to the grave as I will take to the grave as well. However, here are some that you'll see that everybody's protected, and you kind of know what's going on, or the people who haven't been privy to it as you and I have.
Good. Well, Billy, let's do this again soon, and we'll keep in touch.
All right. Great, Norm. Good to talk to you. Enjoyed it.
Thank you. Once again, Mr. Billy Sample. So I'd like to also remind you, Brian, here we go with the sponsors. Are you ready? All right. So MDM Design, Mark Canham does our shirts. Check him out. He does a great job. And then Base by Pros, Mitch Canham up in Washington, sports education. And baseballdudes.com. To be the best, you must train like the best. Chris Gazelle out of Vancouver. And baseballism.com. Check out the Flag Man. They have a great deal going on. They were just on Intentional Talk on the MLB Network they have this childhood cancer hat and shirt that Kevin Millar and Chris Rose wore. And so check it out, baseballisms.com. They're great friends. They're doing a good job. Check it out. We stream live on yamhilltoday.com all the time. And if you're looking to sponsor, shoot me an email, normbo18@gmail.com. We'll be back with old friend Judah Newby from 750 The Game. We'll be sitting in, and a story that you're not going to want to miss. Doc Jacobs, an American badass, up next at 5:45. Thanks for listening.